Plugins for guitar. That's what I've been exploring in this three-part series. This is actually part 2. In part 1, I looked at a main rhythm part for a recent production that actually involved 2 different guitars that were doubled. Well, the idea here is that I want it to sound like one instrument because they're actually playing the exact same part. So the trick there is to bus them, and then from there, there's an opportunity to do some last processing to bring those 2 guitars together to make them sound like one instrument. Big and wide, yes, but really it's one instrument. So I'm going to take a look at the plugin chain that I'm using on my guitar bus. Now, if you missed part 1 where I talked about the plugins in the individual tracks, the link is in the description. Part 3, we're going to talk about the plugin chain for a guitar solo. So look for information on that in the video. Well, let's not waste any more time. We're going to be talking about this. When I am doubling guitars, or if I'm grouping different guitars together, especially in this case where those 2 guitars are actually playing the same part, it's identical parts, they're working together to become one instrument. And you know, you've got it left and right, so you're just creating this really wide sounding guitar. It's not like I've you know, play different chords or different voicings and things like that to create sort of a layered effect. In this case, I want the guitar to sound big, but ultimately it's one guitar part. So instead of sending that to the master in the mix, I'm actually sending to a bus. I'm subbing those 2 together. And then for my last final little tweaks, I want to work on them together. Anyways, what I'm doing here in my guitar bus plugin chain, I'm using another plugin from Fuse Audio Labs. This is the VQA 154. This is just like a vintage EQ. Just using some subtle moves here. Again, I just like the tone and quality that I'm getting from this plugin. Not doing a lot. I mean, the fact that the 2 are just coming into this plugin and then just making some simple moves. And again, this is in context. Just perhaps I'm just trying to shape or pull or add a couple little things just to make the guitar sound that much better in the mix. Next in this chain, we've got another Pro Q3, which you'll see gets used a lot here in my projects. Again, Pro Q3, very powerful EQ. In this case, I'm using dynamic mode. It is a dynamic EQ, and what that means is you can set a threshold, much like a compressor, to say, I want to do this correction, but only when it hits a certain volume. And at that point, I want you to bring it down. So there's some pretty subtle cuts here and a couple little boosts here. It's all done dynamically, so they're only kicking in when they have to. And also mid-side processing. That's a topic for another video, but you can actually manage the frequencies in the middle of the mix or on the sides, because sometimes you'll have conflicts there. So I'm doing some mid-side processing with the Pro Q3 here. Just wanted to mention that, but very, very powerful pretty much everywhere in your mix, without a doubt. And then I've got these 2 little mag plugins. Again, I actually bought them, as I said, when I was mixing this project, that air band and just very specific bands and frequencies here. I just find it works on the tracks. And then for a last little bit of cleanup, again, the moves are subtle here. These are just last little polishes. And just, again, to get that pair working well in the mix. So those are the 2 mag plugins. And then a couple of, now these are 2 plugins that will fall in that specialty category. One of them is the Brainworks Refinement. This is designed to take an edge off of those sort of the digital harshness sometimes that can build up. Some people find that working just in the digital domain, it can be a little brittle and cold and things like that. Obviously, we got a lot of vintage style plugins to avoid that, and that's why we use them. But the BX Refinement is a great tool to pull out once in a while if you're feeling there's just a little bit of harshness, a little top end harshness, where you just want to, you know, give it more of a warm tube quality to it. I find just using it subtly, not using too much, but it's a nice plugin, again, just to, as its name suggests, refine the sound just a little bit, and you can blend it to taste, mix it in with the original signal. It's an interesting plugin where if you're finding just there's a little bit of harshness that you're just trying to get out. And this last one, which came to me just before I did this video, and I almost wish that I had it, and I do wish that I had it when I started this project, but Track Spacer from Waves Factory, really loving this plugin right out of the box. I mean, this plugin is designed to do exactly what its name says, and that's Track Spacer, finding space for tracks. utilizing the sidechain, if you haven't gotten into sidechaining yet, it's a very powerful tool where you can use another track as a reference for this track. So for example, bass guitar and kick drum, you want to get them working together. Let's say you set a compressor on your bass guitar, but you sidechain it to your kick. So when the kick is going off, it makes the compressor on the bass react, to pull it down when the kick drum kicks in. So it gets those two instruments working really well together. So with Track Spacer, utilizing the sidechain feature, in this case, I felt the guitars were colliding a little bit with the snare drum at times. So I used the sidechain connected to the snare drum, and then set the parameters here to pull down the guitar a little bit when that whack of the snare drum kicks in. Almost created a little bit of a rhythmic kind of thing with the guitars. It's really, really interesting. And then using the low cut and the high cut, you can sort of narrow where that correction is taking place. And a very, very, very interesting plugin, Track Spacer. I think we're going to be seeing it a lot more in future projects. But an example of a third-party plugin where the developers have focused on something very specific, and you'll be hard-pressed to find something like this in your stock toolbox. But certainly using different EQs and compressors, maybe a little bit harder just to get it to do what it's doing, but certainly to consider that there is processing to be done on a sub if you are grouping instruments together. And whether you're using plugins like this or just stock plugins just to do that final polish, it's definitely a good trick to learn that once you've mixed, pair them together, send them to a bus, and then do a last little bit of processing there before you send it to your master, and so you can finish that mix. The plug-in chain on the guitar bus is not intended to drastically change the tone of the guitars. The purpose is to bring the double track guitars together and sit them better in the mix. Let's take a listen. Well, there you have my plug-in chain for my guitar Submaster. I certainly hope you found that informative. Remember, this is the second part of a three-part series. Part one talked about the initial guitar tracks that were fed into this bus. If you missed that, check it out. The link is in the description below. The third part is actually going to talk about a guitar solo, the plug-in chains that I use for that. Plus, I'm going to see if I can replicate that as I do use third-party plugins. Let's see what I can do with stock plugins and see how that turns out. That's in part 3. Make sure to check it out. That is in the description below. Well, if you're new to this channel, I hope I've earned a subscribe. I've got a ton of content on this channel, many revolving around this home studio with videos geared to hopefully help make your home studio life better. So just click that subscribe button and come along for the ride. If you really want to support this channel, I am on Patreon. Links to everything I've discussed and some things I haven't are in the description below. And above all else, I hope I'll see you again in another video. As always, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. And please like, subscribe, and ring that bell to stay up to date. Remember, you don't need a band to rock and roll. There are a lot of great musical projects you can do by yourself, right from your own home. I hope to see you again next time.